Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So obviously this month there was a federal election that was taking place here in the United States where we get to pick who gets to run the two chambers of Congress, or depending on which state you live in, who gets to be the next governor of your state. We got ourselves the House of Representatives, in which every single seat in every state, even if you don't have a Senate or gubernatorial race, and the Senate, depending on which state you live in. I know a vast majority of you guys are from the United States, so some of you guys have partaken in that election. And if you look into the results that we have of this election, you'll notice that the results are interestingly mixed. Now, I was working on a prediction video, which sadly was not uploaded, or thankfully wasn't uploaded because those predictions were embarrassingly incorrect. I was wrong with regards to all the pickups. I will acknowledge that. My predictions were horrible. They were garbage. They were all trash. I will acknowledge and I will take responsibility for that. Like, whatever happened on election night, I don't understand how you could have predicted it. Although, if you look closely at the individual races, I think I only missed a couple of them. I correctly predicted that Ron Johnson would hold on to his seat. I predicted that Hochul would still win in New York. Mastriano versus Shapiro, I said that Shapiro would win in a nail-biter, although that race did not turn out to be a nail-biter, although he still won, so I'll pat myself on the back for getting that right. I was wrong about Wisconsin and Michigan's gubernatorial races, and I was also wrong about Pennsylvania's Senate race, which is the biggest surprise in my opinion. I never gave a true prediction myself in Arizona with Mark Kelly and Blake Masters. I literally just flipped a coin on that. I did also predict that the state of Florida would be in the safe column for the GOP. The red wave was not totally invisible. It did hit some states. It was especially present here in my home state of Florida. Marco Rubio won by almost 20 points, and in the governorship, Ron DeSantis won the state of Florida by roughly the same margin as Rubio over former Governor Charlie Crist. Both Rubio and DeSantis won Palm Beach County, they won Hillsborough County, they won Osceola County, they've even won Miami-Dade County by like double digits. So it was a red state down here in Florida. It was also a red wave in the state of New York. Lee Zeldin getting roughly within 5, so he did very well, and there are down ballot effects. Republicans are flipping certain districts that Biden won by like over 10 points. I also found out that the DCCC chair for the House has lost his re-election bid, and not that many people exactly saw that one coming. So the red wave hit parts of the country. It happened in Florida, it happened in Texas, it happened in New York. Well, it happened in Texas because Beto was just outright terrible through and through. And as far as Arizona and Nevada are concerned, those were like the two biggest races of the election, or should be. But in Arizona and Nevada, nobody really had a fucking clue. In Arizona, Kelly was out against Masters by only double digits early on, but that lead shrunk as more votes came in. And on the gubernatorial side of things, Hobb had a slight lead over Kari Lake. Laxalt led in Nevada for a while until that lead shrunk and Cortez Masto overtook him. And Lombardo was leading the gubernatorial race in Nevada all the way. North Carolina, Ted Budd won by 4 points, broadly underperforming expectations in North Carolina. In Ohio, J.D. Vance won by just under 7 points. I mean, I'm taking a look at the results right now. It's not really the best showing as far as I'm aware. For some reason, people just did not show up to vote in very high numbers. Turnout was low all around. Vance got 2.1 million votes. Ryan got 1.8 million votes in the state of Ohio. So it was not ridiculously a great night for Democrats either. Their turnout really wasn't that high, but you know, this massive energy that we saw on the GOP side of things was not there. And of course, the most important race of them all is the Senate race down in Georgia, which has gone to a runoff, which is between Herschel Walker and the incumbent Raphael Warnock, or as Kelly Loeffler likes to call him, Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock.
My opponent, Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. My opponent, Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock. My opponent, Radical Liberal Raphael Warnock.
Now, say what you want about Herschel Walker. I'm pretty much aware that nobody really likes him. I know he's got some scandals out, but I still think he has an upper edge of winning the runoff. Say what you want about him, but look, Georgia and the South just loves college football. What can I tell ya? Yes, I'm aware he has scandals, but who's to say that the other members of Congress don't have scandals within them as well? Even if they really do have good intentions and they are, in fact, good politicians. So with what we saw in both the House and the Senate and these gubernatorial races, the simplest way and arguably the most realistic way to sum this up is Everyone lost. And this is, in my opinion, the truest explanation of this election. Everybody lost one way or another. Both parties, while they can claim some victories in some House and Senate races, both parties really did not get what they wanted. And either way, it doesn't matter how you want to chalk this up, regardless of political party, it is an L. And honestly, the American people as a whole kind of lost out. This is a loss for the Democrats, especially on the popular vote side of things, and looking at Florida and New York, and there really wasn't that high of a turnout. And again, what we saw in the Rust Belt and the Southwest and all these battleground states that were easily winnable, this was especially a big loss for the Republicans. The fact that they were given this big opportunity and completely underperformed in every single expectation when every single outlet, every single metric was supposed to fall within their favor, it did not happen. And John Fetterman is about to become a U.S. Senator. Yes, you heard me correctly. Bigfoot Frankenstein himself, who cannot remotely gather a coherent sentence to save his life, is going to be the next senator of Pennsylvania. And that hurts quite a bit because I lived in Pennsylvania. I used to live in Monroe County, in case people are asking. Katie Hobbs, someone who refuses to debate her own opponent, has a history of discriminatory behavior, and can't even speak Spanish in a state that is literally 30% Mexican on the border, is going to be the next governor of Arizona. Absolutely atrocious election for the Republicans, and it's also not the greatest election for the Democrats either, hence why I said everyone lost, hence the title of this video. So of course people are going to sit back here and say, what happened? Why did this happen? Which they should. I don't know why they shouldn't be asking questions. So let me explain exactly why and talking about each of these parties, why we got the result that we got. Now on the Democrat side of things, Joe Biden's unpopularity is playing a role. This is why the Democrats were poised to lose the House. But why did Republicans do so poorly in an election where they were favored to win? Like, this was supposed to be a cakewalk for the GOP. This should have been an easy W. So what happened? What went wrong? And I mean, what really went wrong? Because you cannot just sit back here and say, well, it's just, Ma 1-6, Roe v. Wade and democracy. You cannot say that because it's not entirely true. I mean, when you really think about it, if you take a look at certain states where that could have been used as an effective issue, you know, those specific issues that could have energized Dem voters, they weren't energized whatsoever. Now, I'm not really going to get into too much as to why, because that all deserves a separate video on its own. I'm working on a future video talking about that. But the results that we just saw in the midterm elections, this obviously deserves to be analyzed and explained, because a lot of this is obviously confusing. And we look at where you see these shifts compared to 2020, honestly, this has to be the most schizophrenic map that I've ever seen in my entire life if I've seen one. The trends for both parties look awful. Now, if you take a look at a swing state like Florida and even blue states like California and New York, the four largest states in the US, California, Texas, Florida, New York, all four of those states, trends for the Democrats look awful. Now turn our attention to the Midwest, the Rust Belt. That's where all the highest concentration of independent voters are. Take a look at Wisconsin. Mandela Barnes getting around 48 to 49% of the vote against Ron Johnson, who ended up winning by just slightly under 2 points. Meanwhile, on the gubernatorial side of things, Tim Michaels completely self-destructing against an unpopular incumbent, Tudor Dixon doing even worse in Michigan. Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro did much better against Mastriano than expected. In the Senate race, John Fetterman of all people managed to beat Dr. Oz. Arizona, Dems swept every single race in very lean margins. So it's no secret that the Republicans did just as bad, if not worse than the Democrats did in this election. Now, the reason for that is because not that many people turned out, as I mentioned earlier, and there's a big reason for that. Some voters did not turn out, and if independent voters did turn out, they didn't turn out as Republican as many people expected them to turn out. The reason? GOP leadership are incompetent as fuck. That's your reason. And I would like to point out that there are 6 people that I blame for what you're seeing right now than Trump could ever be, because I'm noticing a lot of people on both sides who are blaming Trump for this, because of course some of the candidates that he endorsed did not end up winning in the general. I will obviously get into that later on, but there are obviously people that definitely deserve to be blamed as to why they lost. Starting with Mitch McConnell. Now, Mitch McConnell took money that should have been reserved for races like in Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Georgia, certainly in Arizona. So he diverted millions and millions of dollars worth of fundraising money from those races that should have been targeted. Laxalt could have been points ahead and won. He could have literally been on the driver's seat this entire time. Blake Masters could have easily been ahead of Mark Kelly, and he could have won that race. The Senate race in Georgia could have never went to a runoff, and Walker could have easily won. You could have propped up Mastriano. You could have helped Oswin. You could have funded Kerry Lake. Kerry Lake would have won. Hell, you could have even gone to New Hampshire and you could have feasibly had a way forward to get rid of Maggie Hassan. That would have been a major fucking pickup. In all honesty, if Bolduc won in New Hampshire, that could have been one of the biggest W's. You could have went after a plethora of other vulnerable House seats and the GOP would have already have clinched the majority earlier, and you wouldn't have to sit there for several more days worrying about this. Let alone, you could have gotten a much bigger majority than you have right now. Instead, what did he do? He took money out of the Masters, Laxalt, Bolduc, Lake, Michaels, and Mastriano campaigns, respectively, and he used all of the money, get this, on a GOP versus GOP race up in Alaska, and convinced the RNC to divert all of its money to a race in which the Republicans would have automatically won, because he wanted to prop up Lisa Murkowski against evil Kelly Tshibaka. Next up, you have Lindsey Graham putting forth, and virtually all Democrats, and even some Republicans, and basically most of the American people, who all essentially looked at this and said exactly the same thing about it. Lindsey Graham putting forth on the table a national abortion ban. And I mean a full-blown nationwide ban on abortion. Now, this is way too extreme, and despite Roe v. Wade's overturning, this is also blatantly unconstitutional. It was so out of line, it was so unconstitutional, and it was such poor timing that even Mitch McConnell himself fucking shelved it. Even he wasn't that crazy, not only because a bill like that is already unlawful and it would get struck down by the courts anyway, he also probably thought it would negatively impact some of his allies as well that are running for Congress or gubernatorial positions. You know, like Lisa Murkowski. He probably was like, I know this is gonna do damage to MAGA and America First, and that's a great thing, but it's also gonna harm some of my allies that are running for re-election too. So, shut up, Lindsey Graham. Please, now's not the time right now. The GOP at large as well, under Kevin McCarthy and Ronna McDaniel, they're arguably the most responsible for this loss. Of course, McCarthy did to the House what McConnell did to the Senate. Him and some of his candidates also went along with Graham, talking about if they win the majority of both chambers, they're going to ban abortion nationwide, taking advantage of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, an issue that the Dems were losing at, especially with the whole late-term abortion thing and what was going on in Texas, essentially retaliating with their own national proposal, and as a result, you're going to piss away independent voters. Which brings me to another point. Messaging is the most important thing in elections. Now, I've also been hearing the term candidate quality being tossed around back and forth. May I remind you what happened down in Pennsylvania and Arizona? Just for a second.
And the Eagles are so much better than the Eagles.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is that there are actually some really good candidates. If you take a look at Ohio, the race with J.D. Vance, that race could have been an easy cakewalk for him. Completely underperformed in Ohio. Ron Johnson did worse than what people anticipated. Mandela Barnes getting, again, he won by like 2 points. And even if you look down in Iowa, Chuck Grassley, who has won his elections in major landslides in the state of Iowa, and he only won by like 12 points. And for him, that's very low. When you really think about it, that's a very big drop from 2016. And the last time Chuck Grassley ran for re-election, he won the state by like 30 points. So compare 30 to 12. That's a very big drop when you really think about it. I mean, what we have witnessed is an implosion of the Republicans. A GOP implosion. because the RNC is abandoning these candidates and propping up their candidates that they want to win. Terrible messaging through and through, like a national abortion ban in the case of Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham as a result. Their messaging sucked. Their candidates sucked. Some of the good candidates did not get the funding that they needed. Some of these people were abandoned completely by their own party. And as a result of all of that happening, people were not just energized to turn out. Nobody wanted to turn out. And if they did vote, and if they were energized, they didn't vote as Republican as many people thought they would. A lot of the independent voters just were not necessarily very enthused about this election. Let alone, I don't think any of these independent voters were at all enthused about the RNC whatsoever. All because of what they were doing. That says something because of the fact that this administration is hated. I mean, looking at the approval ratings, looking at the polls, it's no secret that this administration is highly disliked by the American people. Nobody is at all happy with what's been going on with the Biden administration lately. I mean, you have foreign policy failures, you have a crippled economy that is in complete shambles, inflation is through the roof, gas prices have been absolutely through the roof, cost of living is through the roof, shortages of everything in the ongoing supply chain crisis, you have a border crisis going on, but still, a lot of these people in a lot of these states, especially in states with a high concentration of independent voters, you know, the ones that are not ancestrally Republican or even ancestrally Democrat, but they may like Trump, and some may also like Obama. They voted for them twice and voted for Trump twice. And they were not necessarily super enthusiastic to come out and, you know, vote to hand Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy the Senate and House respectively. And some of these voters even didn't like what Lindsey Graham was putting on the table. And this is very true. And as a result, they are getting shit-wrecked in a lot of these places. And Trump's obviously getting a lot of heat for this. A lot of people are blaming Trump for the GOP's loss. Although when you really think about it, he really isn't that responsible. Him and America First in general is not even the reason why they lost. The GOP just hasn't learned a thing. They will never learn. They'll just refuse to do any soul searching. They won't even understand why they haven't been reaching these voters fulfillingly and effectively. They won't even take notes on certain campaigns. Like 2 examples of these really good solid campaigns that didn't stab their base in the back and were still able to energize enough independent voters that actually cared about the issues that were being brought forward to actually win. And that is a major issue. You look at campaigns like Glenn Youngkin in Virginia last year. You look at what DeSantis did and what he's done in Florida. He actually produced results. Now, does that necessarily mean that he's better than Trump when it comes to the presidential level? Not necessarily. You know, yes, I like you as a governor, but as far as presidential politics are concerned, I think it's a little bit too early for that. Both DeSantis and Youngkin bringing parental rights and education to the forefront. Now, DeSantis has been attacked for it numerous times this year, and I got a whole separate video about all the people attacking him on his Stop Woke Act, banning critical race theory. In all honesty, socialism lost too. Keep in mind, Charlie Crist's running mate made praises to Fidel Castro and is also a self-avowed socialist. Even people like Ana Navarro scrutinized Crist for it. So it really was the left's dysfunction with critical race theory that played a role. It was also the economy, the inflation, all that stuff. It actually did work and was proven to work in a state like Florida, in a state like Virginia, and even in Texas. Nobody wants their kids to be taught a curriculum where they're supposed to hate each other or themselves and look at reality through the lens of race. Also, look at what Ron DeSantis did in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting. Actually walking the walk on Parkland, firing the sheriff, holding school board members accountable, setting up a school safety committee, passing Alyssa's law on the statewide level. And speaking of which, that needs to be a nationwide law. Looking at all the things that Ron did while he was governor, that's why Florida wasn't close. No shit he won my state in a landslide. Again, this does not indicate that he will make a good president. Keep that in mind. It's still too early to determine that. Look at what happened in New York. Lee Zeldin focusing on crime, bringing that to the forefront. Crime was essentially a focal point in the Zeldin campaign. Yes, I understand, Kathy Hochul still won. What did you expect from a blue state like New York? And making a deep blue state that close of a race is a big accomplishment and a moral victory at best. You look at Joe Lombardo, did a great job with messaging in Nevada. Carrie Lake also did pretty well in Arizona as well. They're actually staying on target, and they're staying on message, and they are actually relating to their own base. They're also being sufficient not to run, terminally online campaigns, if you know what I mean. They're actually getting the right messages out, and they're actually winning. And you notice that you're seeing a lot of this year, this cycle. If some of these candidates are able to do just that and do this effectively and not, stab the base in the back, not say stupid shit and promise stupid things and run a competent, sufficient campaign, they're going to get things done and they're going to win. That's why you saw certain results in certain states. Again, Florida, New York, California, Texas, the big four. Meanwhile, you got people like Kevin McCarthy and McDaniel. Where the fuck is the messaging? And then we go back to things like abortion. The average American already wants abortion legal, but they do not want the abortion in the third trimester. They don't want late-term abortions. What happened is the Democrats took that issue, and they gotten so close to the edge that they were able to fall off. Meanwhile, the GOP, on the other hand, instead of taking advantage of the Dems' mistake, they overstretched in their own way. The whole abortion argument is basically like a game of tug of war. The GOP already was winning on that issue because the Dems were overstretching, especially with Dobbs and what was going on in Virginia. Instead of doing the right thing and, saying, yes, Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Yes, we don't want to have late-term abortion on the third trimester. And yes, we are pro-life in general, but we're not going to do anything on the federal level. Leave it up to the states to decide. We will incentivize states to ban third trimester late-term abortion. That's it. Leave the rest to the states. That's all you had to say. Instead, people like Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham said, oh yeah, we're gonna ban abortion outright when we're elected. So you essentially took an issue which the Democrats were going above and beyond on and were losing support on, and as a result, you decided to counterbalance that by giving a certain demographic of voters a reason to turn out en masse, even in red states. I really don't think it's Trump's fault for what happened in this election. If anything, the only blame that he should be getting right now is not being involved enough, especially in regards to campaigning. Again, look at the Midwest. Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Kentucky. This is the most populistic area in the entire country. And remember what I said, the Rust Belt has the highest concentration of independent voters. The voters that voted for Obama twice and Trump twice. Those voters. Dr. Oz and Doug Mastriano literally underperformed throughout the entire state. Philadelphia was not the only problem here. Harrisburg wasn't really a problem. Pittsburgh really wasn't the only problem here, even though Josh Shapiro was in fact a Yinzer, being from the city. Breezewood, Pennsylvania, Chester County, northeastern Pennsylvania, my neck of the woods. Those weren't really just the only problems. Lehigh Valley wasn't a problem. Certain counties up here, small towns, rural areas. It wasn't just that. It was the entire state. The whole state of Pennsylvania in general was a problem. And you really cannot blame fortification because there are some areas in the state where fortification was not really taking place there anyway. And of course you have ongoing lawsuits happening there as well. You can't say Pennsylvania was stolen from you. You can't. Maricopa County is a completely different story. We'll get into that in a future video. Point is, there really wasn't a lot of voters that turned out at all. And if they did, they didn't vote as Republican, as you would think. It almost looks like not that many people were enthused about Dr. Oz and Doug Mastriano down in Pennsylvania. And keep in mind, Shapiro is almost like another Tom Wolfe when you really think about it. And Fetterman, on the other hand, have you seen this dude speak?
The Eagles are so much better than the Eagles.
And I understand there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, oh, well, because he's a populist. He's like one of those populistic types that you could win in the Rust Belt. No shit, he won. Oz led in the polls. I don't think anybody really liked Fetterman that much as you might think. When you really think about it, nobody really was inspired to vote in Pennsylvania anyway, even if you do have Shapiro and Fetterman as the nominees for their respective positions. Also, Dr. Oz barely got any funding. So you put two and two together, and it's going to get to the point where you see exactly what you just saw happen. And Shapiro wins in a landslide win. This race was supposed to be a nail-biter with him, eking out a win with less than a point. Fetterman, on the other hand, ends up walking out of Pennsylvania with a 4-point lead when he trailed in the polls. Both Republican challengers were favored to win, at least one of them was, but both Republican challengers get humiliated by unpopular opponents, while both opponents were trailing in the polls prior to the election in a Rust Belt state, a purple state with one of the highest concentration of independent voters in the entire country. And this is a pattern that you notice throughout this election. It's not just with Fetterman. Katie Hobbs, Maggie Hassan, Catherine Cortez Mastro, and Mark Kelly was going to be hard to beat anyway. But you notice that all of the toss-up states, all of the toss-up Senate races that were easily winnable on the GOP column did not flip in favor of the GOP whatsoever. The only victories that the GOP have in this election was the House, barely holding on to the House, and the governorship of Nevada. That's the only flip. A governorship in Nevada. They couldn't win any of the battleground Senate races. On the gubernatorial side of things, they couldn't win Wisconsin, they couldn't win Kansas, they couldn't win Michigan, they couldn't win New Mexico, they couldn't win Arizona, they couldn't win anything. The only race that they were able to win was, again, a gubernatorial race in Nevada. And unfortunately, a lot of these candidates got completely shit-canned, and it's the same thing with some of these House seats. And it's not because they're America First candidates, and America First is dead and it's unpopular. Like, the red wave missed the Midwest and the Southwest, all because of a combination of lack of funding and terrible messaging. And they'll blame America First for causing them to lose. I don't understand why Trump is fully to blame for this. The only blame that he should get is not being involved enough, obviously. It's just like the 2012 election with Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Both candidates virtually said the same things, and nobody was really enthused about Romney's messaging. Romney was unpopular through and through, and you have the same shit with Tom Emmer propping up some of these figures in some of these races of unpopular candidates. Some flippable districts, like the one in Illinois where Adam Kinzinger used to be in, that could have been an easily winnable district had we had the funding and messaging. And Trump in some of these races was doing all that he can. We would have been looking at a completely different night if some of these races flipped. If Oz actually went out there and actually won in Pennsylvania, if Masters actually won in Arizona, if Laxalt actually won in Nevada, it would have been a vastly different night had the RNC not completely and totally abandoned them, and we would have saw more of that energy, especially in the Southwest and the Rust Belt. The GOP could be looking at 53 or 54 Senate seats. We could have saw that map that I predicted of the Senate races. Those maps that I made would have been easily doable. Unfortunately, candidates like Masters, candidates like Laxalt, candidates like Bolduc, Dr. Oz, maybe even Walker, maybe even Doug Mastriano and Carrie Lake, they did everything they could to energize their base. Trump was doing everything he can to help them, funding them as much as he could, but you also want to keep in mind that he can only do so much to actually help out. The dude was doing as much to help out, and the candidates were doing as much to energize their voters, while the RNC and the GOP establishment completely and totally abandoned them. And as a result, turnout overall wasn't really where everyone anticipated or what everyone else anticipated. And it's just abysmal. It's horrible. It is just plain horrible. This was a bad election for the Republicans. And I mean, this was terrible for both sides, by the way. I know I've been hammering the Republicans a lot, but they're the ones who pulled a cootsy when literally odds were all in their favor. A red wave that turned into a red trickle. This was a bad midterm, especially for the GOP. And Kevin McCarthy does not deserve to be Speaker. Mitch McConnell does not deserve to be Senate Leader. And Lindsey Graham needs to be voted out. And the current leadership of the GOP should all be sacked. They should all be sacked just like Joe Burrow without his offensive line. Because of what we just saw on election night. This is a total sham. This is atrocious. As if the Biden administration has been nothing but a complete fucking catastrophe for the past 2 years, and you're still able to get, like, what? A 2 or 5 seat majority in the House? You might possibly have 1 less seat in the Senate. You can only flip 1 governorship. In what was supposed to be a red wave year, a year where odds were totally in your favor, and the only thing you were able to do was flip 1 governorship in Nevada. This is ass. This is complete ass. Ronna McDaniel is completely inept. She needs to go. And I hope Lee Zeldin becomes the next GOP chair, in all honesty. I really do think Zeldin is fit for the job. And I'm not blaming just McConnell, not just blaming Graham, not just blaming Emmer, not just blaming McCarthy, not blaming just McDaniel, not just blaming Ducey. All 6 of them take blame. All 6 of them are equally responsible. This party needs an overhaul in leadership, cause it's getting fucking ridiculous. These people keep shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again. There are so many winnable races, and they just completely blew it. They blew it. And the only victories that they had in this election is flipping a governorship in Nevada and only getting a narrow House majority because of California, Florida, Texas, and New York. Kevin McCarthy, who is not well liked by House Republicans anyway and might not even have the votes to be Speaker, needs to go. Yertle the Turtle, Mitch the Bitch McConnell, who I never liked and no reasonable person in this country does, by the way, including most Republicans, needs to go. Ronna McDaniel, who is not well liked even within her own party, needs to go. Tom Emmer needs to go. And Lindsey Graham needs to go. All of them. Every single one of them. Doug Ducey, he's gone. Thank God. This is a fire festival. This was a total, complete fire festival. So anyway, with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the little notification bell. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias, links are in the description below. Of course, I'm also ending the conversation down to you guys, so be sure to leave some comments out to see what you think about this election. What do you think really happened here? And what needs to be done to improve for 2024 and beyond? As long as things are objective and civil, leave all your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video around with all your friends. Family, boyfriend, girlfriend, enemy, whomever. Share this video if you can, helps out a lot. And you can also join my Discord server so you can, talk to me, hang out, send some video ideas, play video games with me, have some fun and whatnot. So join me on the Discord server if you can. But anyway, like, subscribe, ring notifications, and until then, take care, talk soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.